yes. Very good. Huh. Hi there. I didn't see you. I was just going through the textbook, as I normally do after a very long day of teaching, making sure I'm checking up on all my content, reviewing for key facts, and looking at different inquiry models that I might use in class. Oh, sorry. Many of my students might not know what this is, but this is called a newspaper. And I was just reading up on the current events in my local community and globally going on around the world, making sure I'm current on everything, so that even in my classroom, I can use that as proper examples for relating and creating synthesis for them. Oh, that sound? No. That's not all the powerful energy coming out of my brain right now, thinking of different lessons for my students. That's actually a couple classics of Beethoven. I like to use the music to reinforce and bolster my knowledge while I study over different things after hours in school. Oh, sorry about the candle lighting, but it's making sure I can read these books over here. Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States, a true classic in the history world. Oh, wise my teacher told me I won't be doing any of those, but another great book that students will be able to be empowered by in the classroom. But these are all not the things that make a great classroom or even a great teacher. These are just resources that make you become a better teacher in the classroom for yourself and for your students as well. As a teacher though, my goals in the classroom is that I want to make sure that I create an inclusive environment where students feel comfortable enough to explore history in a multitude of different facets and opportunities. That I am not limiting them in any way, shape, or form. They are able to embrace and accept history for the important content that it is. Now, many students might not believe that history is that important, and maybe it doesn't excite them. But that's not my goal. My goal is to make sure that they understand what we're learning about, and they can actually learn something about our history and be able to use it in their everyday lives. And really, in a classroom, while a main goal of mine is to create great history students, it's really to create great people that can take the skills from the classroom and apply them into the real world and show that they have knowledge and can make important decisions beyond even just the classroom. And I believe that my ability to do that in a classroom will help give them those skills and capabilities outside the room. Now, if we're talking about the ideal classroom, where does this all happen? How do I make this possible for these students? Now, my ideal classroom really, if I want to be pretty frank about it, is really just having desks, having a chalkboard, and having students in the room that actually want to be there and ready to learn. Now, while that might not seem like a lot, that's really all you need to make a great classroom. You just need the kids to be there, and you just need a chalkboard to explain, talk, and you can do everything else on your own, and they can absorb history, and you can do so much with so little. If we're talking about a more advanced classroom, a smartboard would definitely be a huge opportunity to use the students for interactivity, create different types of video programs, technology forms. Obviously, having Chromebooks, having laptops, iPads can also be very helpful, allowing students to connect history in very different ways, either through research or just visually seeing them on the computer. But even more so, just having a classroom where there's just the opportunity to just grow. There's space, there's materials and supplies and textbooks, all these different things that allow the students to actually be reinforcing all this different material together and having the proper space to do so. Now, what do students get out of Mr. Didi's class? When they come in every day, what are they getting out of it? Whether it's a 40-minute period or an 80-minute block, what are they getting out of that time that I have with them? The main goal that I really want is for these students to get a grasp on academic content and to build skills that will help them in history. Now, academic content, a lot of people think in history that's just rote memorization. It's not just memorizing a bunch of facts and dates. It's moving beyond that. And especially in line with our New York State standards and the Common Core and the way that we're moving towards different models of inquiry and application and synthesis, what we're doing in the classroom now is really giving these students the tools, giving them the content, and having them use that content to create different ideas. Having them apply them to problems, apply them to issues happening in their community, having issues in their own lives. How they can take this content knowledge and really bring it out beyond just the classroom and create skills, whether it's evaluating different terminology, justifying decisions made by historical figures, creating new ideas for solving problems even if in a historical manner, looking at things geographically, mapping, all these different factors. And that's really the kind of skills we want to grow out of the ability to give them this content in the classroom. Now, how do you make history exciting? I spent my entire life in high school looking at a PowerPoint every day in class, and I thought to myself, this doesn't excite people. this doesn't really get kids excited about history. When you're just looking at a board every day and kind of taking in notes and not really going through it and going through the motions of doing all these notes, that's not really necessarily what history is about. History is alive. History happens every day. And I don't mean to take that from the History Channel, but they're right. History happens the day after you leave school. History's happening on your drive home from work. History's happening when you go home and talk to your parents. Everything like that is history. But really it's just you viewing it a different way. So what I do in class is that I try and differentiate as much as possible. I love to integrate technology. I love using smart boards. I love using smartphones. I mean, if kids are going to have them in class, smartphones are not going to go away. If using technology is something that actually helps them in history and can be used constructively in class, why not? We did a QR code scavenger hunt in class where students use their phones for 30 minutes. Now, some people might say, okay, our policy is that we really don't want the students to use the cell phones, but if you can use them in a manner that excites them, I think that's just something truly incredible to do in the classroom. But beyond just technology, what else excites them? Presenting the knowledge in a different way besides just doing PowerPoints, while they do have a point in class, and I'm not necessarily declaring war on the PowerPoint today, but moving away from that, giving kids scenarios, giving kids station activity, moving them away from this, giving the knowledge in a way that they can actually see it and see it in a way that is maybe in their own lives, that's what I think is really what makes them most excited. And I think students in my own class have gravitated towards those different experiences where we move away from just the direct instruction and move towards the small groups, the independent work, working outside of classroom on projects. That I think is what really gets the students excited, and I think that I've found a very good balance between making sure they get that content and develop those skills by doing all these different kinds of things that excite them about history. Okay? Now, exciting students is different than having them love history. You can excite students about history, get them excited about wanting to do it, get them wanting to look at things in a different way, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to love history and you leave your classroom after a year. But at least you can get them involved and wanting to take that extra step to want to have that history involved in their lives in some form or manner. Now, in the classroom, I kind of mentioned differentiating a little bit, but how do I not steer right to the middle? I don't want to just hit the middle. I have kids that are fast learners, I have kids that have low accessibility, I have kids that have IEPs, 504s. How do I make sure that I'm not just covering in the middle and going straight down the middle where students that are higher up and lower up, they don't get either challenged or they are challenged too much? How do I do that? In my classroom, what I found is that beyond just following just a middle path of giving kids notes, giving them activities to do, I make sure to include things that can test and challenge students. If they want the opportunity to do something that's a little bit harder, I've created modified assignments. I create a modified journal assignment where students will they can either take the standard one or they can take a little bit of a harder one where they can have the opportunity for possibly a better grade on it, but they are challenged more with that exact project. That's their choice. A lot of times when I give questions or even tests or quizzes, for extended choice questions, I'll actually give them two choices. Maybe they're more confident in one part of the content knowledge we've gone over, or perhaps maybe a skill they've been learning has been at least more defined than another one. And I can see that choice going on, and I can allow them to have the opportunity rather than just forcing them into one simple question that might not be exactly what defines them as a learner in my classroom. But even more so differentiated. How do I make sure that every student is enjoying history? How do I make sure the student that is the sports player feels like they are getting something out of this class? Even activities that we do, whether the sports kid that's the leader, I can separate them into groups, creating this idea that we're using group activities. We're using silent independent work where students have the opportunity to challenge themselves. I actively create groups. I find it to be a very constructive way of running class, and by making those groups, I can put together kids that are either of high level and low level, pairing them off and creating much more powerful groups where they can actually jigsaw their skills off one another and create this really cohesive group that can really, in my honest opinion, amaze a teacher by seeing what these kids are able to do. And this is by simple things, by differentiating, changing things up, and even just making sure that every day is not a note day. You don't have to have a note day every day. You can do things different. It doesn't always necessarily have to be that way. But how do I also get students to solve problems? History is all about problems. How does we see change over time? We want to see that kids are able to actually solve these problems. Now, if I'm just looking at the newspaper right here, and I'm looking at the very front cover, we have problems happening every single day in our country. Okay? And if I want students to be able to apply this, usually at the very beginning of class, we'll either do a small bell ringer activity, a do now, Or we might even move towards a closure of the class and figure out a way that we can actually apply what we're learning in class to solve a problem. Now, not necessarily can you use a problem-solving method or inquiry in every single class, but I do believe that there is a place and time for using this problem-solving. Whether it's to justify a different way of going about something, whether it's to change the idea of whether a country went to war or not, decisions on technology, decisions on religion and placement and social activity, all these different things can apply into the problem solving. And I think that while we can scaffold a lot of this material for students early on, I think that from the beginning of the year to the end, you can really see by the application of these skills each day, rounding them off, reinforcing them, reapplying them, students can really get a very strong grasp on problem solving in a multitude of different ways. And it doesn't have to be one simple way. It can be, since students are such different people and learners, they have different thinking styles and learning styles, it can actually be really interesting to see how students go about problem solving in a multitude of different ways. Now, going even further though, beyond problem solving, can all students learn? This is a question I've seen a lot. Can all students learn? And if, as a teacher, if I was to say that I don't believe all students can learn, I would have to take my diploma, anything that I've ever taken in an education class, and say to myself that no, I can't do this because I don't think every student can learn. That's completely false. I don't agree with that. I don't think that's a way of looking at teaching, a way to look at students, a way to look at the community that students are in. I don't think that's any way to talk to a child anyways. A person that's actually coming to school every day, wanting to learn, getting excited about material, that is nothing to say to a student ever. I firmly believe in all possibilities that all students can learn. Maybe not all students learn in the exact same way, but all students can learn, and it just takes the skills and the opportunity to learn how that student may function in class, how they learn, what gravitates towards them, what really excites them about the content and the skills, and figure out how to do that and then apply it in the classroom. And that's how I believe all students can learn. They might not learn in the same way, but they will learn, and all students do have the capacity to do so. Now, in this century, I've dealt a lot with parents and seeing how parents have become a lot more involved in the teaching process. Now, my communication with parents will obviously involve a lot of hands-on communication. I intend to keep up correspondence through email, whether a student has been doing very well in class, or maybe they haven't done so well in something. Maybe they need extra help. Maybe I can see how a parent can help apply more material at home to reinforce what the student is learning. Maybe that can actually assist them in what they're doing. Now, I think parents can be an excellent resource. A teacher can only do so much in 80 minutes, and a parent has a child at home for the entire day after school ends. So honestly, I think parents are a great resource that can help students. They're great to communicate with, and they can also be a way, a terminal of how students can actually learn beyond just the classroom, and interacting with those parents can create very strong bonds that can only help the student even further, and even the community in general. Having those close bonds between the person that sees your child every day and the person that raises the child at home. So, in my former placement, we dealt with something kind of new in the teaching world. A really big push right now with 21st century teaching is that people are creating these learning communities, or as the more technical term, professional learning communities, PLCs. Now, in my former placement, we did a lot with PLCs, either meeting with teachers during planning periods, creating cohesive assessments, learning resources, putting together these large groups, using technology, cloud-based software to create these large permanent files so teachers can share resources and kind of communicate. Because as we move forward in teaching today, the classroom, a school that has 200 classrooms, that can't be 200 different classrooms. That's a school. Teachers can't just view buildings as each having their own classroom, and that's your way of teaching. Nothing else is happening in the building. Your classroom is exclusive from anyone else. That just can't be the way it is anymore. Schools are a building of people that work together to help these students out. Now, whether it's cross-content learning, whether a social studies teacher and an English teacher work together, whether just a bunch of social studies teachers teaching the exact same subject, maybe global history, maybe teaching economics, any way that they can come together and kind of create this cohesive way of self-checking themselves, making sure students are getting prime content knowledge that they necessarily have to have, and also just hitting a lot of standards that are presented to us today with Common Core and the changing standards for New York State history. Now, I think these are incredibly important. Cooperation is essential. Faculty members are an incredible resource. They not only are able to help you kind of get involved in the school culture, but they can also help you after it's been a long day. And if that long day is on Monday, you have 4 more days. And the faculty members can really do a lot to either help your experience and also just help you grow as a teacher, because not necessarily everyone teaches the same way or has learned or gone through the same experiences that you have. So I think having great relationship with faculty members is incredibly important to maintaining a great relationship at school and just becoming a better educator over time. I don't think you necessarily can learn everything out of a textbook or theory and practice, but learning from other teachers can actually be a great way just to not only network and communicate, but kind of synthesize this bigger idea and this bigger vision that you have for your students as a whole in that grade. Now, why is it important? As a history teacher, I was asked a question once in class. If you want to rank 3 different things: 1, content knowledge; 2, relationship with your peers; and 3, having good rapport with students. Now, my most important will be having a great rapport with my students. I want to make sure they feel comfortable. I want to make sure they can communicate. I want to make sure that we all have a great relationship where we can actually positively affect change in learning and create a great environment where they can do so. I think having great relationship with my peers, as I was just saying, is really important as well. And I think having content knowledge, while it's not necessarily the most important for me, it's more so because as a history teacher myself, my own personal philosophy is that teachers are always learning. You're not necessarily going to be a content knowledge expert on day 1. You might not even be a content knowledge expert on the last day of school. As a teacher, you're always growing. Even students in my own classes have brought up examples of things that I didn't even know about. And now teachers are expected to just seem like this all-knowing, encompassing person that knows everything, has every fact ever memorized. It's not the case. You're almost a student of education as well in the classroom. As a teacher, and at least, especially for me in history, where it's always changing, more research comes out, more documents and more inquiry is done. But really, as a teacher for myself, being a learner all the time, I mean, you can even just see, well, even just these books that I've gone through and read over, you're constantly learning outside the classroom. You can only do so much out of one textbook. Really, it's you wanting to have that drive, that desire to have even more knowledge, be able to really bring up bigger points, connect main ideas, and just being a constant learner is just not something that's just great as a person, but great as a teacher to really have as a skill to pick up, whether or not you enjoy doing it, but it also will help you and your students, which is really what we're all here for, is just helping out the students and growing their own knowledge. Now, to summarize all this, as a teacher, I believe that myself as a teacher, that educating students and being a resource for them, whether or not it's with the content, whether or not it's in their own lives, I believe it is so important to help out students in today's changing world. Now, I don't know what the classroom looks like in 20 years. I can only assume it'll be very different from how it is today. But today, standing here, what I can say is that my goals and what I strive for in my classroom, whether it's the student that misses class a couple days a week, the student that's always sick, the student that is a star athlete in class, the student that quietly minds their own business. It doesn't matter what the student is or who they are before they come in, who they are after they leave my class. It's helping them in that time period that I have with them, spending through an entire year, or even a couple years if I have different classes with them. But really, my main objective, my main goal is to make better people. Students are people, and using history as a vehicle to create that idea of giving them this content, giving them information, moving beyond rote memorization, moving beyond simply explaining things and having them write it down. I believe that them being able to apply history, synthesize, evaluate, summarize, generalize, identify, growing skills, gaining knowledge, these are all the things that will help them even beyond my class. And history is not the end-all of life. And I understand that. I love history. Every student that comes to my class is not going to love history. And they might not love it on the last day of class either. But if they came in on day 1 and they were ready to learn, and they left on the very last day, and they gained something out of my class, whether it was they remembered some funny fact about a general, or maybe some obscure thing from a book we were going over and read, a resource that kind of intrigued them, maybe something changed in history they never even realized. Maybe they looked at something a little bit differently. Maybe they considered something. Maybe they went out in their own community and saw how history affected other people and decided maybe they can make and affect the exact same change locally for themselves. Doing any of these things is what makes me fulfilled as a teacher, and would make me feel as though that I have done my job as an educator to help out a student and help them grow to become the best that they can possibly be. My name is Nicholas Deedy, and I am a secondary teacher of education.